And we are live. Oh, yeah. Hello, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed UFC 280. It was a rather lively one. It was lots of surprises, some things I wasn't expecting. Terrible on predictions, I think. I mean, I kind of talked myself in and out of the main event over and over again during fight week. And, you know, it always gets to the same situation where I'm like, as I'm watching the fight, I'm thinking to myself, you know, could have seen this coming. But it's, you know, you work with what you've got. And we'd just not seen Makhachev perform at a level against someone like that before. I mean, it was incredibly impressive. So I'm going to talk about the whole card. I'm going to go back and talk, well, not the whole card. I'm going to talk about some of the other fights on the card. There were, of course, some really good performances, a couple of slow fights, but generally, you know, an enjoyable card. And it was so nice. I'm sure the people in the UK will agree. It was so nice for it to be on UK time. Hey, Jamie, didn't you just enjoy sitting with it? You know, the sun was setting and, you know, wasn't like trying to make yourself a coffee at 1 o'clock in the morning. And, you know how these things are when you're a European MMA fan. You have to make all kinds of commitments that people in North America take for granted. Honestly, I lived in Vegas and you've got it lovely over there because you've got a nice time to go and watch. Like, it was yesterday. It was like the fights were finished at 10 and then we were both like, oh, well, now what? We'll go for a walk. It's like 10:30 going for a like little walk around the village. They must have thought we were very strange at that kind of time. Yeah, interesting. And then, of course, I got back and watched the press conference. And I got 2 shout-outs last night. I got one from John Anik, talking about the wicked right hand of Muradov. And I got one at the press conference from Uncle Dana. So thanks, Uncle Dana. I always love your attention. And one thing, if we've learned something from the press conference last night, it is that Dana does not give a fuck. In the words of Tupac, he just does not. There might be some swearing in the show today. I'm in a bit of a swearing mood. Just had a good little workout. Got my kettlebells done. Got my sweat out. Ready for the gym in the morning. Okay, right. So I've got a little running order. I've got the live feed up. So if you have questions for me, please feel free to drop them in there. I will try and get to some. I've got Jamie here. He's monitoring it. I've got V monitor it in a secret hideaway in the crow's nest, so she can send me messages, V, if you see something good that's a question. Fire it over in WhatsApp or whatever. And we'll have a chat. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but we'll see how well this room goes down. Welcome to Rum Sundays on the Full Reptile Radio. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the illegal knee that Lena Lansberg took like a damn champ. Like, ate that shit, just up against the fence. No, I'm fine. Let's go. Like, she's given birth. She's been breastfeeding through training camp. Nothing's going to faze her. She's incredibly tough. And what I liked about it is that, like, although it was quite obvious that she was fine to continue, before the fight restarted, she made sure that referee was going to take a point. Take a point, dude. Take a point. And this is kind of the first point I want to talk about is like, we need a hard, fast rule for this. Like, the warning is in the back, right? These are professional athletes. If they don't know the rules by the time they get to the octagon, that is their damn fault. Take a point. Take 2 points if you think it's a bad knee. But it should be a base level take a point, first time. Like, you've got to get people watching their weapons. Like, we don't need this confusion because, you know, it happens in world title fights and it trickles all the way down the card. And we had 2 great examples this card. We had Lansberg getting nailed in the knee, and then we had the Omar Gadzhiev one. Same referee, very similar situation, both pretty bad knees. One was a point deduction and one wasn't. And I don't know where the consistency, and of course it is down to the referee to deem whether it is worth deducting a point. But I just think we're at the stage now where we've got to have a blanket rule of, if you knee somebody in the head and they're downed, that is you not having control of your weapons. You get your first one in the warm-up area. That's my thoughts on it anyway. But Lansberg took it like a champ and continued fighting. And, you know, and that raises another point as well, because she didn't win the decision, did she? So I don't know what her fight purse is, but I would imagine that, I don't know, 15 and 15, something like that. She's lost 50% of her fight purse, and you know, and that's an unfortunate thing, because that then incentivizes the fighters to stay down if they can continue. And some fighters just won't. They'll just want to get up and keep going, and Lansberg is one of them. But I think it's at the stage where, like, no matter how light or bad the knees, it's got to be a minimum of a point deduction first time. We've got to start discouraging people and start helping people learn this rule. Like if there was, I always use the offside rule because it was invented in my lifetime in football, and it was weird because it was like it happened in the Premiership, and then all of a sudden everyone at school was talking about it, and it's like, oh no, that was offside. I'm like, what are you talking about, offside? But the goals didn't count, so you quickly learn the rule. You know, if you knee somebody in the head and you get a point deducted, you will learn that rule pretty quickly. And of course, if it's a bad knee, you've got to think about taking 2 points. That's my first talking point. I am interested to know your thoughts on that, because honestly, I'm probably going to leave you with more questions than answers in this show. The more I go through this card, the more I'm like, well, that raises up interesting conversations. You know, scoring, of course, we're going to get into the Sean O'Malley-Petr Yan fight, because I could score it both ways. I could give you a reason, an argument for why it scored both ways. But what was weird is that when I watched it the first time, my instinct, I scored it for Petr Yan. When I watched it back, I clearly saw Sean O'Malley winning the first and the last round. But then, you know, is that because I've watched the fight twice now, or is it because I know it goes to a decision, so I'm scoring it more carefully? Because that's ultimately what I think it is. Like, if I know a fight goes the distance, instinctively I score it. If I don't know, I'm waiting for someone to get finished. So it's a different relationship as a viewer. I'll get into it in a little bit, but it's. I'm interested to know your thoughts. I put a poll up straight away on my Twitter, and got a few thousand responses, and like 70-something%, 72% of people, I think it was, thought that Petr Yan had won it. Ultimately, what the question it raises to me is, if the majority of people viewing felt instinctively like that fight was Petr Yan's on the decision, including Khabib, obviously, he was watching in the Baku, that's just come out recently on Instagram. Should the scoring criteria reflect the general consensus of who's winning a fight, or should we keep the scoring criteria as it is and make sure that people are understanding the scoring criteria? Because it could go one of two ways, and I have no dog in this fight. I have no interest in this either way. All I like to know is what is and what isn't. And there's so much confusion around this that it's a worthwhile talking point. Because if I included, if everybody instinctively, as we watched it, casual viewers, we're not judges, we're not sitting there from the first round judging it. Because like I said, when I watched it back, I scored it for Sean O'Malley, but that's because I was scoring it consciously. And when I'm watching fights, generally I'm not. I'm absorbing the fight as an instinct, which of course kind of throws you off, and it moves a bit more towards the one championship style of scoring. Like you just kind of, who do I think won the fight at the end? Like I don't like that either. It's too loose-ended. It's too open to interpretation, and I don't trust some people that are interpreting the rules. So what I would like is a clear understanding of what and how. And I think we have that now, but what we may have learned from that fight last night is that the scoring criteria as it is doesn't always reflect who we as a viewer instinctively feel watch the fight. And there's something about a crowd as well. I mean, of course, you know, that crowd you could argue was very pro Petr Yan. So Piotr, I keep getting told off for saying his name wrong. I'm sure someone in the comments is already shitting on me for it. Piotr, I can't say it. I just sound weird. I can't say it without like a weird like Siberian accent. I've got to just call him Yan. A lot of people felt like he won. But if I watch it back, and if I keep the scoring criteria in mind, and if I sit there with my notebook and I go, okay, well, there and there and there, and then after I put that notebook to one side and then I look at the UFC stats, I'm like, okay. Maybe the judges are just seeing it in the way that we should all be seeing it if we were sitting down actually judging it. And because we're kind of watching it in a more passive way, I don't know. And then, you know, the other thing as well is I watched it on mute, and I think if you're going to score it, you've got to watch it on mute, because then you don't get the kind of general commentary consensus of who feels like what's happening. And which, you know, is, of course, we've got 3 very educated guys that follow MMA, you know, every weekend in there. But we've all got our own biases, of course. Of course we have. Like I have an instinct for picking people like TJ Dillashaw over Aljamain Sterling because I feel like he likes to scrap more. And, you know, if you're the betting public or if you're watching the war rooms, unfortunately, you have to take that into account. You know, if I was wearing one of those cool hats that Khabib's got, and I was doing a breakdown on Makhachev against Charles Oliveira, you would instinctively know which way I was leaning. Most of the time, I really hardly ever care. Occasionally, I'm watching a fight and I'm like, I'd like this kid to be successful because I've met him and they're good. They're a good kid, you know. But then I always look at their opponent and go, you know what? It's got to be an even playing field. I've got to look at this as objectively as I can, and that's a challenge for all of us. But the job of the judges, of course, is to do that. And anyway, I've jumped ahead of myself already. I wrote a running order for myself, trying to learn from what normal people do in production, and I've already gone past it. Okay, so first of all, talking of people that I enjoy watching succeed, Muhammad Mokaev. Partly because he's a very, very good athlete and a very good martial artist. Partly because he came through IMAF, and I think that is a very useful and credible method for young fighters to progress through to professional sports, professional MMA. And of course, we've had a Raptor embedded with him this week who lost his moustache. Did you see they shaved his moustache off? Wicked. They should have shaved the rest of him. It looked like Gollum. Okay. So, I want you to just have a look at the end of this fight. I'm not going to show you too many clips because, you know, it'll probably get me in trouble. But this is just super, super slick. Like, the pressure in, the drive that we're seeing from Mokaev down through this shoulder is making Malcolm turn away from him, making him give his back. And as he turns, you can see this pressure on this arm. Like, the hand's caught here. The arm's coming through, there's the hand, and it's trapped between the head and the shoulder of Mokaev. So, of course, now he feels this as vulnerable and he's trying to get this free because while it's trapped, it's no use to him. And as Mokaev lifts the pressure up, he jumps and he clamps straight over the top. So as that arm comes free, you can see Mokaev progresses his position straight up onto his back. And now he's over the neck and he's under the arm. So, right arm controlling the right arm of Gordon, and the left arm is under the neck. So, of course, that's the primary threat from Gordon. You'll also see Mokaev squeezing with these knees as well. Now, he's fortunate enough to be in a position where the fence is right next to him, so he can lean into that. If this was, if this was out in the center, he may well have slipped off or to the side in this position. But, you know, this is all about utilizing the space that you've got. See how he's kind of propped himself on his head a little bit here? And what we're seeing is, what's happening here, which we can't see very, very clearly. Malcolm's bringing his hand up to try and clear this hook. Then he's going to go back to the arm that's choking him and he's going to start to peel it off. But this, you can see how this is kind of caught now behind Mokaev's leg. He's going to go to the choking arm and he's going to peel it off. Now you can see he's got his left hand on it. And he's going to start fighting, 2 hands on 1, on the choking arm, because again, that's his primary threat. And this is a super slick move. I've watched this a bunch of times to try and really make sense of it because they're so tangled up. I sometimes wish they had different colour gloves on because the tape doesn't really help. So you can see Mokaev's got this leg here that's going up and underneath and hooking into the back of Gordon's leg. He's also got the other leg, of course, down the side, as you can see, in a position ready. Now, as the space comes here, you can see Gordon clear that foot. As the space starts to develop here, Gordon feels safe because he's got this control. He feels like, okay, I'm safe now. I've got one of his hands. This is the point where I start to drive forward and start to shake him off my back. And then I'm in top position and we've got, 30-something seconds left. It wasn't long. Here we go. Oh, hang on a minute. Zoom out. There we go. So, you can see Malcolm Gordon controlling this wrist. So he, again, feels like he's in control here. But what we're not seeing in the tangle is Mokaev's other arm, which is wrapped around that same arm that Gordon is controlling the wrist of Mokaev. And as he chicken wings this arm up, you can see he drives this up to clear this hook, this kind of lagging foot that's bothering him, flares it up, Mokaev goes straight over the leg. And this is where we notice what the other leg's doing. There's no hook here on this side. He's not been able to get his foot in. But he has slid his knee in the side to prepare himself. So when Malcolm Gordon lifts up, look how the arm extends. And again, like Gordon's holding himself into this armbar. The only way that Mokaev is controlling this is with the other arm, which is what, in my opinion, makes it so beautiful. Because there's a moment here where he may have had to re-establish that grip, and Gordon just wasn't quick enough to recognize it. Chicken wings that leg up, and then whack over. And a lovely hyperextension. Got to watch out for this kid. He's on a quick route to the top. He's learning fast. He's confident. He's charismatic. He's got a really good support network behind him. I'm incredibly excited for him, and that was a good performance against a tough individual who gave him a lot of problems in that fight. And that's what we need to see from these guys. Of course, we need them built up at the right timing, the right direction. No freebies, no cans. Of course, you're not going to get that in the UFC, but that was a tough opponent. He was able to work his way through some bad spots. He had to answer some questions for us, and he came out with the finish. Very impressive. Excited for the rest of his career. The other fight I rather enjoyed was Krylov against Oezdemir, just because and I mean no disrespect by this, but I really don't see any of these two guys getting to a title shot. I would love to see them correct me, but I kind of feel like they're positioned in that like top 5, top 10 gatekeeper position where they're going to be an absolute nightmare for anybody that's on their way up to try and get a title shot. But ultimately, they're going to linger in that position until their career kind of either peters out or they decide to call it a day. It was a really fun fight to watch. Oezdemir came out guns blazing. He hurt Krylov a few times. The other thing that stood out as well was Krylov constantly working his wrestling. He was relentless. Closing distance down from the second round onwards, especially 7 takedowns out of 20 attempts for Krylov. That's a hell of a pace to set, especially for a light heavyweight. Fun fight. I don't really have much more to say about it. I just rather enjoyed it. Now, this is where my predictions went completely out of the window. Belal Muhammad, Sean Brady, and Dariush versus Gamrot. I was expecting the kind of the new wave to be ready to kind of move along. And we got 2 solid performances out of Belal Muhammad and Beneil Dariush. And there were different performances in the way that they approached it, but both exactly what we needed to see for them to, beat these really, really tough individuals. Now, the difference between the two, of course, was the way that they fought. Belal Muhammad, of course, has been training with Khabib. You could really see that. The confidence that he got from that training camp, from the preparation that they must have put in, from the real kind of camaraderie of the team. He definitely benefited from that. He came out with, well, he was pissed off. We'd say with a B&A bonnet in England, but that it's a bit old timey, isn't it? He was annoyed because I was looking past him. I was thinking Sean Brady is, undefeated, strong, powerful. I was expecting him to be able to win the first 2 rounds before Belal maybe pulled the third round back. Belal looked great, high pressure, pushing his opponent forward, shutting him down, and that was the real shift in the first round was when Sean Brady's first takedown failed. Because not only did it fail, but Belal really shut it down. Hand fighting, head position, moved his way back, and then it just got easier from that. He was 0 for 5 on takedowns, Brady, and that immediately shuts his game down to being one of half of his game. He's a good grappler, but when you take that away from him, and now he has to strike, and Belal being so aggressive, putting him on the back foot. So we had 209 strike attempts for Belal Muhammad. He landed 80. And 118 for Sean Brady, and he landed 58. Very impressive. And then on the other side, Dariush. I was expecting Gamrot to be able to keep a fast enough pace for Dariush to struggle to keep up with it. Because Dariush is great. He's a chess player, and that's I underestimated him. That's exactly what we saw in this fight. He slowed it right down, and he forced Gamrot to work in ways that he didn't want to work. Gamrot, I think, was expecting him to be far more aggressive. And in the first round, Gamrot was he was trying to initiate the fight a bit more. And Dariush was very good at just kind of shutting it down, slowing it down, picking you off as you're coming in. There wasn't a real fast pace to anything, but it was gradual and it was consistent. And I honestly don't know how else you would beat Gamrot. We've seen him lose twice now. They've both been really hard-fought battles. You look at the stats here. So, where am I? I've got the stats on the screen for this one. Make it easier for myself. My old man eyes. Here we go. So, I mean, look, so first of all, let me change this colour. So first of all, 4 of 19 takedowns for Gamrot, but this is where the total strikes are very impressive. Not only because of the volume that Dariush landed by comparison, but also the volume that he threw. 138, landed 67. You know, stuffed 15 takedowns. Just a solid overall performance from Dariush. And you know, you kind of got to think to yourself, well, you know, I mean, he's got to be moving in the direction of a title shot now, hasn't he? I mean, he was the alternate, and then he was replaced by Volk. Now it looks like we're going to get Makhachev going over to Australia to fight Volk, and that kind of leaves Dariush out in the dark a little bit. And I know that he keeps saying, oh, you know, I'll just keep fighting and whatever, but there comes a time to be pissed off, and I think that time is arriving for Dariush. And, you know, you look at the guys above him, so Chandler, Gaethje, Poirier. I mean, does he want to be fighting an Oliveira immediately? I think Oliveira might take a bit of time out. I wouldn't even be surprised if we see him at welterweight for a bit. I know he made weight. But he was cutting from Tuesday. We have to remember that. He was cutting from Tuesday. And this is, I mean, for me, this is common sense. You want to be dehydrated for as little as possible. There's no benefit really in sitting in a sauna and sweating out and then rehydrating and then going in the next day and then sweating out and then rehydrating. The only benefit in saunaing is to be dehydrated. So if you start on a Tuesday, you're going to be partially dehydrated the whole week. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. You'd be better to exercise. Now, I don't know whether it's a bit of gamesmanship, because they put that photo out of him laying down on the floor, looking completely exhausted and all kneeling around him. There was a photo of him, obviously from Tuesday night, of him being in the sauna and looking rather gaunt. And I thought his face did look very, very drawn. I don't know. I just don't know why he would have been cutting from Tuesday, or if that was just kind of, they were just kind of playing up a little bit. But it didn't seem to me. It seemed like that's actually what he was doing, and it's just not good for you. You know, you don't want to be. I used to know a fighter that he used to cut the night before, and I know some people do this as well, and probably still will, especially with the morning weigh-ins. But like, you start your weight cut on. I mean, this was back when I was fighting, so we were weighing in at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Like, he would cut weight on the Thursday night and then sleep dehydrated on weight, and then wake up, like maybe float a pound or two at night. But man, I hate early mornings, but I would rather get up and sweat it out on the morning. And if you're doing that, you don't want to be losing too much. So then that brings into question how much he weighed, and how much he cut. Yeah, I kind of gone off on a mad tangent here. I was talking about Dariush and Gamrot. Yeah, I mean, Dariush, you know, you've got to think he's got to get like a marquee fight now. You've got to give him, you know, I don't know. You've got to give him one of the bigger names at the top. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight a Chandler, Gaethje, or a Poirier before he gets his opportunity straight for a title. But then everything could be thrown into chaos if Volk manages to take the belt from Makhachev, or if Makhachev gets the belt from Volk and then, you know, it's a close match and Volk wants a rematch, or in the time that Makhachev fights Volk, then Charles Oliveira is desperate to get back in there because he's disappointed with himself, and he comes in and smokes somebody in the first round, and everyone's like, champ has a name, etc., etc. Like, it could go a number of different ways, and the problem with Dariush is that he's just not loud enough. He's just not loud enough. I'm not talking about in a volume sense. Of course, he was yelling into the mic in his post-fight interview, but he's not grabbing people. There's not much about him that people really go, God, I'm invested in this guy. I am 100% invested in this guy. Not like you find with the other guys in the division. I mean, you know, the legions of support that Makhachev and Oliveira had is unrivaled in the division. I can't even think of anybody in the division right now that has that kind of support at all. I mean, you know, lots and lots of people like Poirier and Gaethje and Chandler, but I don't know as their support is that adamant. I just, you know, I mean, Conor McGregor, but then they're people that, you know, come into MMA only when McGregor's fighting, so they don't really, you know, it's not really the same kind of thing. I don't know. I feel bad for Dariush because he could be caught in this holding pattern, and unfortunately, Gamrot could have beaten him. On a different night, it might have been a different fight. And there's a lot of fighters that are coming up in this lightweight division. I mean, you look at Jalen Turner. He's gonna be a problem for a lot of these guys, especially with these physical attributes. Dariush doesn't want to be waiting around here for too long. If I was him, I'd be calling out one of those three legends above him that are kind of towards the end of their career and get one of those big wins on his record, and then see where the land lies after that. But it's what he doesn't want to do is always be the second option. He just doesn't want to be the second option. He wants to be the guy that everyone wants to watch fight for the belt. And it seems like Volk has immediately kind of taken that position off him. Great performance nonetheless, even more so because it was against such a tough fighter in Gamrot. Still not counting Gamrot out. That's 2 tough lessons that he's had in the UFC so far. Of course, he expected when he arrived in the UFC for the level to step up a little bit, and that's why he wanted to be here, to test himself. And he's finding these levels, and he will learn from that fight. I have no doubt about it, and he's still young, loads of time. Okay. How's the live stream going, Jamie? I've not even checked it once yet.
Good, yeah.
Yeah? Okay, good. Well, that's because I've just not stopped talking, is it? I've just been talking constantly. Okay, let me have a look. So we've got Petr Yan, Sean O'Malley next. Right. So, first of all, I mean, well, I've talked about it a bit. How did you score it? Like, so watching it live, I felt to myself that, I don't know. I'm thinking back and I'm thinking to myself, that first round was incredibly close. It was hard to score it either way. But I felt like Yan wasn't doing a lot to start with. I felt like he was pressuring and he was leaving O'Malley with a little bit of space to kind of pick and prod at him. He landed some good kicks and he got that big, massive takedown, but he didn't do a lot at all with his takedowns. And I think this is a big issue when it comes to the scoring of the fight, because total strikes was relatively similar. I mean, Sean O'Malley threw more but landed slightly less, but was far more successful with his significant strikes. Let me just zoom in on the top for this, see if you can see it on the screen. So that's the significant and total strikes. We've got Petr Yan at the top. So he landed 58 of 96 significant strikes compared to 84 of 163. But what you'll notice is that there's a lot more significant strikes by percentage, 163 of 171 from Sean O'Malley compared to 96 of 139 for Petr Yan. The reason for that was obviously because he was throwing some short strikes in the clinch. He was throwing some short strikes on the ground. I was surprised when I looked at the stats to see how little he actually was credited for with landing on the floor. Sean O'Malley also wasn't credited for that takedown, I guess, because Petr Yan popped straight back up to his legs. But if we look at this, so what we're seeing is Petr Yan, we've got 1 of 3 takedowns in the first round, 3 of 3 in the second round, of 2 of 7 in the third round. Now, I don't think there's any denying. I think everyone can agree that Petr Yan won the second round. He got 3 takedowns, all 3 attempts. He had 2 minutes and 42 seconds of control, and he landed 45 strikes compared to 22. Slightly more, it's 3 more significant strikes as well. So the second round was a solid round for Petr Yan. Easy on the scorecards. The first round, you can kind of go one way or the other. You can see Petr Yan landed slightly more. Petr Yan landed slightly more significant strikes. Total strikes 28 compared to 23. But then all of Sean O'Malley's strikes were significant at 23 compared to O'Malley with 19. Anyway, I'm going through numbers here. Basically, what you see is that O'Malley just edged him in the first round on the strikes and defended 2 of 3 takedowns, which doesn't count for anything on the scorecards, but it does allow him to keep the fight in the range that he prefers. Minute 10 of control credited for Petr Yan. If we look, though, at what he did with his total of 5 minutes and 44 seconds of control, and we skip onto this next page, what you notice is that he actually didn't land many strikes. He landed 6 strikes on the ground, 5 in the clinch. And they weren't nearly as significant as the strikes that Sean O'Malley landed in the clinch. I mean, you look at that third round, that knee that cut him. That was a big score for Sean O'Malley. Anyway, I'm kind of probably not making much sense when it comes to this because I don't really have an answer for you. I have questions. My question is the scoring criteria delivering us the winners of these fights, or are we looking at this too much like a fight and we need to remember it's a sport? Because of course it is a sport, but the point of MMA is for it to be as close to a real fight as possible so all of these martial arts can come together, or whatever your style of fighting can come together and see what works. Now, over the years, as it's developed and it's become its own thing, it is a sport in itself. Like, MMA is now a style. Like, there are certain things that we know for sure if you're an MMA fighter, you've got to be working these things. Basics, basic boxing, basic clinch work, basic grappling, wrestling, takedown, offense, defense, your ground skills. You need some basic submissions as well. Like, you can't be an MMA fighter without these facets. What we're now trying to establish is who is the best MMA fighter out of the two. So it's changed now. It's not who's the best fighter out of these two martial artists. It's who is the best MMA fighter out of these two athletes. So then the scoring has to become more nuanced. It has to become more detailed. And I know that the judges, a lot of the judges, they take their job very seriously. They sit down with their notepad and they are tuned into that fight for the full 15 or 25 minutes. What I recognize as a viewer in myself, especially from this, when I was watching this live, I'm waiting for a finish. So I'm not sitting there with a notepad going, okay, there, that counts for something, that doesn't count for anything. I'm not, and I'm also not scoring round by round. Instinctively, I'm not. I know I'm not. I'm not going, okay, well, I mean, maybe I'm kind of coming to a conclusion at the end of each round, but then when it comes to the decision, that all kind of goes off the table, and I'm kind of like, I have a feeling I go, well, I kind of feel like he won or she won. Interestingly, that with this particular fight, a lot of people felt the same, and like there were lots of tweets going up. There were tweets coming up on the page from people like journalists who were scoring it that got first and second to Petr Yan. There was, I think, Kevin Iole was the one that scored it even going into the third round. I mean, you tell me, does the scoring criteria need to shift to reflect who we feel actually wins the fight? Because then it's about who lands the most shots, who's the most bullying, who octagon control and aggression then comes up, as long as it's effective, of course. But like I talked about this the other day on the War Room. Like, you watch Canelo against Erislandy Lara, and you can see how Canelo bullies his opponents, and it just feels dominant. Like, if I'm a fighter, do I want to be a really slick counter striker, or do I want to be someone that pushes and dominates? I'll be honest. I want the latter. I want that Khabib style where you just don't take any damage and people they suffocate underneath you. I love a slick counter striker, but there's always that moment where you could be on the other end of the punch. And if you roll the dice enough times, like I have, and I've been fortunate on most of those rolls of the dice, eventually you come up condit and he lands a big left hook on your chin. Like, that's where the benefit in wrestling comes into play, because there's a methodical path. Like, the person being wrestled, as long as you've got some wrestling, you know what's happening. You know you're being wrestled. You know what the person's trying to do, and you can't stop it happening. With striking, there's this mystique, this mystery about it, especially when you're watching someone like Anderson Silva, who is like, I mean, or Adesanya, of course, is a great example as well. Someone that kind of lulls people into this pattern. Like, Adesanya against Paulo Costa was a masterclass. It was a masterclass in striking. He shifted through gears. He pulled himself back to a gear and he like revved the engine a bit and took a different direction. Paulo Costa's brain was just fried. He didn't want to step forward. He had no confidence to step forward because he felt like he was walking into a wall of electric. Like, every time he stepped forward, it was bang, tz, tz, like, shut him down entirely. When it comes to striking, like for me, of course, like, Petr Yan was moving forward a lot. Like, and the time when Sean O'Malley hit him with a good shot and everyone was like, oh, that was a great shot. He covered and he was smart, just like he would have been if he'd have ever been rocked in one of his boxing matches on the way to getting his Master of Sports. Like, he was covered, he was smart, and then he turned it around. Whack, came straight back. And it looked like a more impactful shot, not only because of the way that he took it and then turned it around on Sean O'Malley, but also the way that he rode off the back of it with more dominance. You know, it's a very, very interesting thing, scoring MMA. And this is why in the War Room, when I was talking about this, I expected this to be a real challenge for Petr Yan over 3 rounds, because I could absolutely see Sean O'Malley doing this. Like, he's got great lateral movement. He's very elusive. Like, you don't feel like you can step forward because he's got those long arms. He'll sting you, or he'll just kind of bounce off, and then you lose your control with him up against the fence, and then you have to start marching him back down again. I thought he played a very, very clever game. I thought his takedown defense looked good. I thought his scrambling looked good. And there was a point when Petr Yan was on his back and he kind of rolled. It was a beautiful little scramble. He clearly belongs at this top echelon of the division. What I like, though, is the fact that he's not only pumped the brakes, but also Dana did in the press conference. He's just not quite ready for a title shot. There's more work to do in this division for him before he gets there. Now, I've had a few ideas. I mean, personally, if I was making a fight, I would want to see him against Corey Sandhagen, and I'd want to see him against Corey Sandhagen over 5 rounds. I want to see how he deals with someone that is confident and slick and has levels to their striking game just like he has, that also has that chaotic scrambling ability on the floor. It might look like 2 guys that have got a very, very similar game, but they are quite different fighters, and I don't feel that we'll see how different they are until they face off. Sandhagen's matched up with Song Yadong, Ultimate Fight Night, at 210. So of course we'll have to wait and see what the result is of that. But I mean, I'm just daydreaming. If I was thinking about what fight would I want to see for O'Malley, and it has to be over 5 rounds. That's the key, because we've got to see him over 5 rounds before we can put him in for a belt. That's just my perspective. Sandhagen would be great, but obviously we've got to see what happens against Song Yadong. Rob Font is ranked number 6, and he is currently unmatched. I think that would be a really interesting fight. Now, Rob Font is a bit more hittable than Sandhagen, I would say. He's a smart, elusive guy at times, but he does tend to get drawn into a brawl sometimes. He can get a bit flat-footed and a bit double-guardy. And against a sharpshooter like Sean O'Malley, who bounces from one side to the next, that static nature of his style when he gets in the thick of it could be dangerous for him, but would be a really, really interesting one, and a solid test for Sandhagen to continue this, test to see when he's ready for a belt. And Merab is the other one, ranked number 3 at the moment, unmatched. The benefit in that would be that it would be a huge promotional opportunity for Merab. A lot more people would be paying attention to Merab if he was able to ragdoll Sean O'Malley, beat him up. Like, there would be a lot more attention on Merab Dvalishvili then, because he's a nice guy. He's a character, and he's a real battery pack of a fighter. You're never gonna have a boring fight with him. He just needs some eyeballs on him, kind of like Beneil Dariush. He needs that fight. Like, Gamrot's a really, really dangerous fighter that doesn't give you that promotional lift, apart from the people that know who Gamrot is and how dangerous he is. Like Beneil Dariush could do with a Gaethje or a Chandler Name or a Poirier, of course. I mean, I've been making all the noise calling out McGregor and whatever. He needs to create these opportunities for himself, and unfortunately, it may be not who he is. But if that's not who he is, he may also not ever be a champion because the opportunity is not created for him. I mean, we have to remember that the UFC is a promotion. If you are promotable, you're valuable. If you're not promotable, you're not really valuable. And you'll be used up as cannon fodder for somebody else because somebody else is marketable and someone else does bring big numbers in. It is just a part of the sport that we're in at in the modern day. I'm still adjusting to it as everybody else is, but sometimes that unwillingness to speak out, as admirable as it is, and it does gain some fans, of course. It does also kind of pushes you to one side in the division when there are other loud people coming through. Okay, I mean, yeah, I've talked about the Sean O'Malley Petr Yan fight. I don't really have a conclusion for you. Like I said, I mean, I'm going to watch it a couple more times myself. Like, my instinct, I scored it for Petr Yan. I think based on his pressure, Definitely the second round, of course, was Petr Yan's round. Third round, O'Malley had a really good third round. He clearly won the first couple of minutes of the round. Then Petr Yan started to push him back a bit. But then the strikes that were landed by O'Malley, for me, in the third round were clear indicators that he was having more success. I can argue with the decision, but I could argue with it both ways. I'm just interested to know what people think, really, and who you were rooting for first, how you saw the fight going before it happened, and then what you thought of the result. That'd be a good little rundown for me. So I'm learning about your thoughts. Okay. Dillashaw Sterling. I was very disappointed with this, of course, as we all were, because we don't feel like we got the fight that we were expecting. Dillashaw looked like he was in incredible shape. You know, you saw him in his hotel room fight week, absolutely shredded. Aljamain Sterling's always in great shape. You know, I just don't doubt that for a second. They both looked to be in fantastic spirits coming into the fight. All the interviews and everything, they were all upbeat. They were excited. Dillashaw was talking like he was going to absolutely walk through Aljamain Sterling. You know, easy money, he kept saying. Then his post-fight interview, he starts talking about his shoulder. You know, he had come out over 20 times, I think he said, in training camp. You know, that is and the issue with the shoulder dislocation is that once it comes out, it goes back in, it comes out, and it goes back in. It gets easier to pop it in and out. Was it Danny Williams, who had a boxing match and threw a punch and threw his shoulder out, still managed to continue and won by knockout with his other hand. But it's one of those things. And you know, kind of like Charles Oliveira getting knocked down in the first round, he was expecting it, so it didn't faze him, which is crazy to think about, because it's, I mean, I've dislocated things. Fortunately, I've never dislocated like a big joint. I've dislocated my jaw, my fingers, my toe, my collarbone. That was a pretty bad one, actually. It took a long time to get that back together. But it's something that you either have surgery or you just live with. And with the 2 years out for Dillashaw, with his age now, you've got to wonder how much more he's got left. You know, what that cut to fight Henry Cejudo did to him. You know, what that took out of his body. Like, you know, your body's stripped of nutrients when you drop in weight like that. I don't know whether he just did himself a disservice, and then, of course, with the suspension, he was just out for a long time. And I don't know. I'm not nearly as enthused about TJ Dillashaw generally in his future as I was before this, because I expected him to be able to beat Sterling. I expect him to be able to shut his takedowns down and to be able to, you know, to outpoint him and walk him onto one of those head kicks. And the other thing that's really unfortunate is that it's not the talking point of Aljamain Sterling's amazing performance, because he looked so strong. He looked incredibly strong in the first round. I mean, you know, like he quickly got to a really strong position. He looked like the weight of a house on top of TJ Dillashaw, who of course was struggling with his shoulder as well, but he was still fighting and trying to work his way out of that position. It was incredibly controlled by Aljamain Sterling. So again, more questions coming into this one. What did he lose on that 2-year suspension? You know, what would we have seen had he not been out for those 2 years? Would we have, you know, would he have been one of the greatest? Would he have been the greatest bantamweight of all time, or is that question always around his name now because of these failed drug tests? I'm just disappointed that we lost him for 2 years, and this is the punishment of suspension, isn't it? I mean, you know, don't do it, because you'll lose the prime of your career. It's disappointing, because I think he's a really good fighter to have in this division amongst them. But I kind of feel like, especially now with the Henry Cejudo fight and stuff, I feel like his body might have just kind of given up on him a little bit. He said it was a rough training camp. He really looked like he was under a lot of psychological strain. And, you know, he also said to the referee as well before the fight started, like, if my shoulder comes out, leave me to deal with it. Honestly, I actually don't know what the ruling is around that, because, you know, you think back to Frank Mir against Nogueira, and his shoulder was snapped, and I'm sure he would have carried on fighting if you'd have let him. Tim Sylvia, when he got caught in that armbar against Frank Mir, there's a theme here, isn't there, Frank? You're evil. Even Tim Sylvia, when he got caught in that armbar, you can see that snap both the bones in his forearm, and due to adrenaline, he just carried on going. He just kept going, or he would have wanted to at least. He was, he was expressing he was fine. And you kind of get into that mentality, like for TJ Dillashaw, it is all or nothing. It's all or nothing. And knowing full well that this might be his last opportunity, or, one of his last opportunities, you're not going to talk him out of fighting. In his head, he can beat Aljamain Sterling with one arm. I just don't know. I don't know what should have happened around this. Again, I have more questions than I have answers for you. I don't know whether anybody with the knowledge of the shoulder injury should have intervened and kept him out of the fight. I don't know whether it doesn't matter regardless, whether his arm is dislocated coming into the fight. If he wants to fight, crack on, because, you're going to get hurt regardless. I don't know. Honestly, I literally sit with so many questions after UFC 280. I was expecting to kind of feel like, yeah, that was good. I feel like I'm ready for like whatever comes next with the UFC, whatever matchups they make next, and I'm just kind of more confused about generally the sport overall. What with the decision with O'Malley and Yan, and scoring it one way, scoring it the other, the crowd reaction, the poll reactions from the media and from people, personalities in the sport, the likes of Khabib, people that are highly qualified to give their opinion and a respected opinion. I don't know. I wonder if we can set something up where we have, like, I don't know, 100 or 300 or 500 pros that are all on Twitter and they all vote at the same time or something. There must be a platform where we can do that, where we have like a closed group of like verified people that can give their thoughts. Because I would like to see, I know we have verdict, but I would like to see like a human consensus about who wins and why. Because we forget we're still a very young sport. We've got a lot to learn and develop still. We are by no means the finished product, and well, yeah. We've got to keep these conversations open. It's like, again, Petr Yan against Aljamain Sterling and that knee. Like, I could debate that all day. I'd just disqualify him. I don't care whether he thought he was downed or whether he thought he was up or not. You got to watch your weapons. Like the confusion that he caused around it in this fight with Lansberg and Omar Gadzhiev. Deduct a point, don't deduct a point. Does the fight continue? Does the fighter stay down and make sure they get their win bonus? I don't know. Do you take win bonus off the table and you just give people a flat rate because they know then that's what they're fighting for, or does that demotivate people? Again, it'll bring it around to a different question about money. V's just messaged me saying super chat. What's super chat? I don't know what super chat is, Jamie. I'm too old for these things, I think. I'm just kind of too old. I say that I've got a room full of action figures and Magic Spoon cereal, but then I have got the old rum sundaes out. In fact, I've not even had a sip of it yet. So where are we next? I'll come back and do some questions with you in a minute. I will have a talk with you. I've just got a few things written down that I kind of wanted to chat about. Okay. Where are we? Come on. Here we go. So, this was super slick. Now, I expected Oliveira to be aggressive. I expected Makhachev to be under pressure in the first round. I didn't expect him to handle it nearly as well as he did. It was like he was like, okay, I know what's coming. I know that he's going to be a wild man for the opening minute or so. I need to keep my calm, keep my patience, not do anything silly, not feel pressured, and that's exactly what he did. It was a really strong performance all round for Makhachev, and he just kind of, and this is like something else that people were saying going into this. Oh, well, you can't look at the stats because they're blah 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 and this and that. I'm going to have a look at Makhachev's stats when they get updated. I don't think his stats will have changed too much. He didn't really take that many shots compared to, some people who are under pressure against Charles Oliveira early. I thought he stood his ground incredibly well. I thought his foot sweeps and trips were on point, and the finish was just a really beautiful sequence. You could see that Charles Oliveira was already hurt. He'd already hit the floor. He was kind of dazed. Maybe he wasn't completely dazed, but we saw no hesitation from Makhachev moving towards his guard. We just saw calculated approach. We saw him, like you can see here. So let me change the color. So what you can see here is we've got Charles Oliveira's one leg here. Hang on, let me do that again. Is Charles Oliveira's one leg here, and then we've got the other leg, which is there. So what we're seeing right now is both of the legs are over to this side of Islam Makhachev. They're over here. So he knows that he's now being able to pass towards where Jason Herzog is to be able to clear both legs. Now, you can't just assume that the legs aren't going to be there if you circle in that direction, because Oliveira's like an octopus and he will pull you in if you don't have a contingency plan. So what we're going to see is Makhachev's dropping his level and driving the left leg of Oliveira down across his stomach. So now Oliveira is kind of twisted up. Now this foot here that belongs to his left leg, oh damn it, is across the body of Makhachev. It's across the body. It's like here. And Makhachev's smashing down with his chest to nullify it. Because with that pressure down, he's also kind of loading himself onto it where he can start to float around the other side. You'll also notice as well that he's going to drop his head right into the side of the chest of Oliveira. At the same time as him doing this, and again, we can't see it from this angle. I was trying to find a different angle, but there just wasn't one. You'll notice that with what Makhachev's doing with his right hand is he's pushing on the knee of Charles Oliveira. The one that was just across his midsection, he's now pushing on that knee. And at the same time as pushing on that knee, he's going to drop his head down to the side of Charles Oliveira's ribcage, because that immediately then sets him up for a position to collect that arm triangle. Here's the push, and now we can see the leg emerge there. So there's the foot and there's the leg. So now he's past this. Now he's starting to smash this leg. Now, of course, Oliveira is going to recover a rough half guard, but what doesn't matter, that doesn't matter because the position that Makhachev's put his head in. Because he's dropped his head into this pocket here, he's already underneath the arm of Charles Oliveira. The other hand is pushing down on the leg of Charles Oliveira, and Oliveira is aware of this. So he's less concerned about this arm and more concerned about recovering his half guard. As soon as Oliveira sees this arm emerging, then he starts to try and pull this elbow down. You can see him now starting to pull this arm down towards the canvas. He's trying to get it underneath the head of Makhachev, but Makhachev has got this space here between his head and the canvas. And as soon as he feels this elbow start to drop down the side of his head, he's going to drop his head to the canvas. There, look, trapped. And then he's got the makings of an arm triangle. He's going to bring the other arm up to meet this arm here. There it is. And then there's the shoulder pressure. And that's the arm triangle there. Beautiful pressure. Driving in with his head. Driving in with his shoulder. Squeezing with his hands. Really, really lovely pressure. Beautiful performance. And it makes me interested to see him against Volk, because, I mean, Volk's going to be on the move constantly. He's never going to hold still. He's not going to want to engage in any of this, because if someone can do this to Charles Oliveira, you remember what Brian Ortega was almost able to catch Volk in. You've got to think, that was Brian Ortega fighting off his back and taking mount. If Makhachev can put Volk on the floor and force these positions on him, upper weight class. I mean, of course, Volk, he used to be, 200 and something pounds when he was a rugby player, but that's not his optimal fighting weight. And of course, it wouldn't be his optimal fighting weight over 5 rounds. One other thing we have to consider: what does he look like at 155 over 5 rounds? Oh, so many questions. So many questions. Okay. Oh my goodness, live feed's streaming. Okay. Oh, what have we got? Justin Carter. If you land 20 and I land 15, but controlled you for 3.5 minutes of the round, that has to matter at some point. Yeah, no, I do agree it does. I do agree it does. It's all down to the individual shots and what value do you put on those individual shots. And there's also an instinct that comes with defending a bunch of takedowns. Like if someone shoots at you 6 times and they get you down twice, but you scramble back up to your feet and you're back, then although yes, they might be scored and credited for that takedown, but if they only get a few seconds of control, it's a it's a credit that I would use to separate the round if it was really close, but I would never do that to outweigh someone either attacking with a submission or attacking with strikes. Like, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, how much do you weigh control into it? Like, the other thing that you've got to remember now is that the UFC stats, they involve control up against the fence. I mean, that we have to define what control is. Holding someone up against the fence is not control. What you do with holding someone up against the fence is you either set up a takedown, which you would get credit for or should, or you striking, which you will get credit for. But if you holding, you can't count that as control time. It seems counterintuitive to me. It seems counterproductive to have, to be able to start crediting people for that, because it's kind of not the way that we want the sport to evolve, Anyway, so beautiful arm triangle there. What was the next thing I was going to talk about? So I talked about Oliveira quitting from Tuesday. Volkanovski was contacted in the early hours of the Friday morning before the weigh-ins to check to see if he was all right, and he was given the impression that there was some doubt on one side or the other. Now, I don't know anything more than that. The interesting interview that Volk had with BT, where he mentioned that, and he was kind of like, I don't want to give too much away, because I would think that he had somebody in mind. I would have expected it to be Oliveira, because again, like, you saw him on the scales with his cheekbones stuck to his teeth, and when they said that he'd made weight, he tried to like stretch out like a very kind of dehydrated leathery tongue. And I know he ran off the stage, of course, but like, if you've just made weight and there's drinks in the back, you might be cramping and really uncomfortable, but you're going to make it to those electrolytes. The sprinting on and sprinting off is, it's... Let me tell you a little story. Let me talk about myself for just 1 second. UFC 95, I fought Rory Markham. And Rory Markham was an absolute tank. I think he was 16-4 at the time. He'd never been the distance. He just absolutely murked somebody with a head kick. Brody Farber, I think his name was. And I was there live for it, and I watched it, and I thought, oh, God. I think I'm going to end up fighting him at some point. Trained with Miletich, Matt Hughes and Jens Pulver. Tough dude. Very, very strong and powerful. Anyway, he came into UFC 95. When he arrived on the Tuesday, he was 195 pounds. He was 25 pounds over the weight class. And this was, official weigh-ins at 4 o'clock in a theatre in London. I walked into, because we were taking on separate buses, red corner, blue corner. By the time I got to the weigh-ins and the holding rooms downstairs, he was already there. And I walked in and I looked over at him, and I felt like death. Honestly, I felt awful, because I used to cut more weight in the past than I did towards the end of my career, and I'd probably maybe 12 pounds or something. I wasn't feeling great anyway, of course, but as I walked into the room and I knew that he'd cut a lot of weight, I looked at him and I thought to myself, I just need to have more energy than him. He looks dead. All I need to do is be more energetic than he is. And I had a couple of friends at that one. You might remember back to the weigh-ins. He weighed in first and went and stood over near Dana. And then as I walked onto the stage, I made a point of eyeballing him the whole time, because I wanted him to feel like I was vibrant, healthy, intense. So I stood on the scales, and there's no photographs of me looking forward. I stare at him the whole time, and then I walk over and I put my forehead on him, and I just drive him back as much as I could before Dana separated us. The only reason I did that was to make a statement to stick in his mind that he's dehydrated as well. We're both on weight, but he still feels strong. In that moment when he felt really, really rough. Sometimes you've got to put on a mask. You've got to put on a face. You've got to be like, yeah, I feel great. I made weight. Super easy. Inside you could be dying. But having the confidence to be able to step into the fight knowing full well that your opponent has no idea that you've had a rough weight cut is invaluable. Who knows what's going on? Who knows who was on what weight? And Oliveira made weight 8 hours before, and that sounds crazy to me. Crazy that he was cutting from Tuesday. Didn't hear anything about Makhachev's weight cut. I would imagine they've got that down to a science, and you are going to make weight if Khabib's there. I would imagine he is going to make sure of it. Weird one. Okay, what else haven't I talked about? Talked about the knee. Have we got any questions, Jamie? Anything popped up?
There's been a few. I've just dropped into tag and ask any questions, so hopefully a few will come now.
Okay, sweet. How are you all this evening? Did you all enjoy UFC 280? Oh, hang on a minute.
Ooh, donation.
Kill the Batman 87. Kill the Batman. We haven't got many Batmans in here, actually. I've got a Batman with a surfboard up there, but he looks like he's about to kill himself with that surfboard. Okay. Love the breakdowns. Thank you, my friend. I enjoy doing them for you. Okay. Do you think Islam put out the blueprint for beating Charles now, or is he going to be like Whittaker and just beat everybody else but the champ? You know, the thing is, I like a loss on someone's record. The Charles Oliveira that we saw after the Paul Felder loss was a different version. It was the same as when we saw him down at featherweight and he was struggling and he moved up and it was like he had this new lease of life about him. Like some fighters, they're undefeated or they're barely beatable and they get all the way to where they need to, where they want to go. Other fighters, they're up and down and they have these storied careers where weird things happen, or you know they didn't make weight or they didn't cut weight properly or they were injured going in. There are thousands and thousands of different scenarios that you could attribute to many different fighters that have been on a journey. Like Charles Oliveira is on a journey. I don't know where that journey is going to take him. It wouldn't surprise me, like I said, if we see him up at welterweight, because I do feel like he's generally growing. Like there was a moment when he was clinched with Makhachev up against the fence, and his back looked a lot thicker and more muscular than I've ever seen it before. Like people grow, you know, you get to a stage, like I remember when I was about 28, all of a sudden I gained 5 kilos and I'm like, I don't know where it is and I can't lose it. It was just a part of who I was now. I was just bigger. And you know, we go through these different stages of growth in our lives. And sometimes if you're a fighter and you've been boiling yourself down, you've kept your weight down for a long time, the moment that you stop and give your body time to rest, you grow quickly. I remember doing that because I was fighting most weeks and I was competing. I was making weight 170. Then I got like 8 months off before I got my UFC debut or something. Like it was a long period of time where it was just odd for me to not be making weight. So I didn't really watch my weight for a couple of months and I just filled out. I was, you know, I can see Charles Oliveira having a very storied career from this point onwards. I could see him having the lightweight belt again. I can see him winning it back in a rematch and then losing it again to Makhachev. I can see him going up to 170. And, you know, there are some really interesting fights up there for him. I mean, you know, imagine fighting someone like Chiesa. I'd like to see that because he's a big, long, awkward dude, good ground game. Who knows what's in the future for Charles Oliveira? I'm still going to have questions around his weight cut, though, because he was cutting from Tuesday. How did Beneil out-scramble Gamrot? Well, by being a chess player, by being really smart and really patient, by allowing Gamrot to cover more distance than he wanted to. Like Gamrot was shooting super low, which is what he does, but then he builds up. And Dariush was like, he wasn't doing anything he didn't need to do. Super efficient, really, really cool. Like, you know, kind of a Gunnar Nelson style of fighter. Like, he'll use the energy that he needs to beat you. And against Gamrot, he was able to keep the space between them so well that anytime Gamrot was moving forward, there was enough space for him to spot it. That's what no man's land's for on a battlefield. Like, you want space from your opponent so you can read their intentions as they're moving towards you. And because Dariush was so controlled with his output, he was able to kind of bring the fight to him and then take pieces off Gamrot as he went. It'd be a massive learning experience for Gamrot. Massive learning experience for Gamrot. Okay. Any more? Hi, Mr. A lot of people saying hello. Hello, everybody. Okay. What else should we talk about? Let me have a sip of this rum. It's like liquid fire. Okay. So you'll want to talk about the press conference, I suppose. Okay. So where do I start with this? It's a weird old sport, and it's a weird old world. Now, of course, I was accused of something at the press conference which was absurd and insulting and disappointing, and not at all surprising. The reason why I wasn't surprised about it was because it was exactly what happened as I was fired. It was the same narrative that they used because, and I'm no longer a fighter for the UFC. I wasn't on contract for a fight as a fighter, so it wasn't like they could put me in there with someone like a Chimaev to get my ass kicked. Like, that was the plan with Nate. Like, do as much damage to him physically and brand wise as possible, so he's not valuable to go anywhere else. And this is a consistent thing, unfortunately, with the UFC, is that people aren't allowed to leave graciously. There's never an opportunity where you can step away from the UFC on good terms because they've invested so much money into you as an asset, as a brand, that they don't want that thing going anywhere else. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a timeline. I don't want to dwell on a lot of this shit. I really don't, because you know a lot of this stuff. So of course, and a lot of people think the controversy started around the Stop the Fight thing. So that was July 26th, 2020. A lot of people think that's like, I was told at the open weigh-ins for Masvidal Till that Dana wasn't keen on the British broadcasting team, mainly because he can't understand what we're saying. Like, you see Dana at the press conference, he's like covering his ear, and like, unless you speak in a really obviously American accent and you speak loud, he really struggles to hear you. He's always had that problem. He's had surgery on his ears, and I understand that he has that problem. I also understand that I'd not lived in the US for a while now, and he doesn't hear my voice very much, so he struggles to understand what I say, and I know this as a fact. I also know that he just wasn't keen on the British commentary team generally because it's not his taste. And this is Dana's show, so everything that goes on is to Dana's taste. So I already knew that I'm kind of like, maybe not. But anyway, so then we skip forward to July 26th and the whole Stop the Fight thing. And this is really where it kind of started to come apart. The reason being because there was a lot of like false narratives that came out around it, like the idea that I approached Herb Dean first of all, which was a misconception because I didn't. I was in my spot, ready to do my interview with Francisco Trinaldo. The idea that I'm friends with Jai Herbert, I'd never had a conversation with Jai Herbert up until the fighter meetings. So that's regardless. It was the second time it had happened in the night. I've been octagon side before when Herb's... Like, I don't even need to tell you about Herb Dean as a referee. It's well documented now. In fact, because I did like an hour and 20-minute video on it, which, of course... Hey up, MMA Guru met me yesterday at Tesco's. Beat my grandma to death. He's a funny kid. You need to watch that beanie though, mate. I bet it stinks. Anyway, so where was I? I lost my train of thought now. You got me, Guru. You got me. Lost my train of thought. Yeah, so anyway, you remember what happened. Look, he got caught with a big shot. He went down. There was this weird, awkward pause and a silence where Trinaldo was standing over him, and I yelled, "Stop the fight." I'm the Stop the Fight guy. What I've realized, and this is a lesson from Dana in the press conference, I don't give a fuck what people think at this point. I really don't. Like, I was fired for speaking my mind twice. I have been defamed. They've tried to fucking shut me down the best they can. They came after all my sponsors. I'm just not bothered at this point. I'm really not. I owe nobody anything. I am here for no reason other than because I love MMA, I love martial arts, and I like talking to you guys. And there's just so much fucking nonsense in this sport. So, coming off the Stop the Fight thing, right? So, the immediate misconception was that I'd got out of my seat and I'd gone over to have an argument with Herb, which I think if anybody has paid any attention to this now, they will know that that is absolutely not the case. Herb also put this video out, shitting all over me, saying, he didn't know who had shouted it, which is also nonsense because you literally watch the point when the fight is stopped, and you can stay on Herb Dean and you'll see him look up and point over at me. I still don't know what he said, but he knew exactly who it was, and he said he was going to, he looked at me and then he came straight over to me afterwards. I don't care about any of that. I don't care about the fact that I'm the stop the fight guy and that I called for that fighter to be protected because he needed to be protected. And some other fights that we've seen where the fighters are needed to be protected. Cowboy against Masvidal. CB Dollaway against, can't remember the guy's name, in Russia. Just literally go and watch this video. It's actually one of MMA Guru's mates, so I'll give him a shout out for your benefit, mate. Google ITP MMA aluminium standard. It's hilarious. I mean, it literally does everything I did in an hour 90 in about 6 minutes. The guy nails it. Like, he's just done it again on one championship. The girl got hit in the body. She waved it off, and he's running over watching her getting TKO'd, knowing full well that she didn't want to be in the fight anymore. I don't need to go on and on about this. I'm bored of myself saying it, and I really don't care anymore that I'm that stop the fight guy. What I care about is the misconceptions that are put out after it. Now, there was a press conference a week later, just before the Brunson-Shabazian fight, where Dana was asked about what had happened with Herb and I. And it was kind of lumped into something else that had happened in another fight. Now, I've got the clip. I want to show you this. Let me just make sure it's the right one. Okay. Hopefully you can hear this.
And then one final one. What did you make of the Herb Dean, Dan Hardy situation that happened in the fight card?
Yeah, let me say this to you guys. I'm glad you asked me that question. Something went down last night in Abu Dhabi, too.
Something went down in Abu Dhabi, too.
Where Goddard got pushed. And I want to make this very clear.
Okay. So that's the bit that kind of slides under the radar that people don't connect, because there was something else that happened, too. Now, the week before, or this was like a few days before the Stop the Fight, that happened. You know, I shouted for him to stop the fight. He came over. We had a brief back and forth. We spoke briefly after the event, and that was it. And then he put that video out, shitting all over me at the airport. So I'm like, okay, fair enough. So I came back and I did my epic hour and 20 masterpiece, put it out. 220,000 of you saw it, and then it just disappeared off our YouTube. Just gone. Nothing to do with any of us, I swear to God. It was just vanished through the back end. So anyway, a few days later, this had happened. Dana had been asked about it at the press conference, and this was lumped into the same narrative, right? So this is what happened in the fight. What we've got is one fighter on the back of the other one, keeping a rear naked choking and not letting it go. And you can see the referee in here shaking, trying to get him off his opponent, who's already tapped and is now unconscious. And now he holds the fighter down, and this fighter now starts to push and fight. I'll just play it. So he's now pushing and fighting and grabbing the shirt of Mark Goddard and stuff. You know, now, of course, that's unacceptable, and he was disqualified, as he should be. The problem is, though, when that question came up at the press conference, Dana immediately just connected them together. So then we've got a fighter attacking an official after the fight's over, and me having a disagreement with the referee because the referee came over to have a disagreement with me. But then, because this was the response, everybody was immediately like, he went over and had a word with Herb Dean. That was unacceptable, and blah, 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 etc., etc.
If you work for me at any capacity and you approach a referee or judge or an official, I will fire you that night on the spot. That can never happen here ever again.
Have you spoken to Dan since that?
I'm speaking to him right now.
So that can never happen here ever again. It didn't happen in the fucking first place, dude. Like, you not got the right information. You got the wrong information. There was a video put out about it. Clearly didn't watch the video. Nobody around him went, oh, hang on a minute, actually, this was the truth. Because no one does, because he's got people around him that tell him exactly what he wants to hear. It's an echo chamber. Like, this is the problem, is as soon as this was said, now this becomes part of the narrative.
I'm speaking to everybody. Don't ever do it ever again.
So, and I'm not going to labour on this point. I'm going to move past it quite quickly. But I just want to point this out, because this is the video of the person that was sitting next to me videoing what happened. This desk here, you can see, that's John Gooden and that's Paul Felder. This is my desk, right? This is my desk. what you'll notice as well is after Herb and I have had this back and forth, he turns around and walks back over towards where he's sat. And I turn around to face the camera because we're in COVID time, so I'm not going into the octagon to speak to the fighter. I'm going to turn around and face the camera, and we're going to do it that way. So as you can see me turn around here, you do your jab, I'll do mine, etc., 2 times. I put my headset on, and that's the interview. I'm straight into interviewing Trinaldo as Herb Dean makes his way back to his seat. So just to put it into context, and I'm never going to fucking talk about this again because I'm so sick of it. I'm here. I'm down at the bottom here. The guy that's filming is filming from that direction. Herb's announced the winner. He's come out of the door, which is there, and he's come down the steps. His seat's over here. And Dana, if you're watching, pay attention. He came around and stood in front of my desk and put his fucking finger over my desk, and he was complaining at me. Now, what am I supposed to do at that point? I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to tell him, dude, that was the second time. It was the second time that night. I know you're tired. We're all tired. It's a weird place. We're exhausted. We're up at all hours. People delivering food and sticking rods up our nose and shit. Fight Island was just weird and exhausting, and I would never want to go back there in my life. People make mistakes. That was a mistake. The fact that he put a video out and he couldn't accept that it was a mistake. I accept that I shouldn't have shouted at him. I understand that. I totally understand that. But the problem is, what we see is the same referees doing the same thing over and over again. They keep fucking up. People keep getting hit when they don't need to be hit. Like Cowboy Masvidal was a good example. I can't remember the guy's name. It's going to bug me. CB Dollaway, poor guy, was in the fetal position, curled up in a ball, rolling around, trying to get... And even when the round was over, Herb didn't want to get involved. Same as that poor girl the other day at One Championship. I mean, she literally waved the fight off. So, I think that's that for that part. So, that was my little rant about like misinformation and how it gets moved around, because it does. You know, there was even someone that set up it was very funny, hilarious. It was even somebody that set up an Instagram account, a Twitter account, saying that they were Herb Dean's wife and that she works for makeup in the UFC. Again, a completely false narrative that people have then thrown back at me. These things get perpetuated over and over again. And unfortunately, when you've got someone who's got a big mouth and a big microphone and they don't have the facts, misinformation gets out and gets spread, and it can be very damaging. Now, just as an idea of the timeline. So the question that was put to Dana was about a video that went up about the Holloway Kattar fight. Now, I don't doubt for a second that Dana was concerned. I don't doubt it for a second. I was right there in amongst it. I could see the concern on his face. Ultimately, I feel that concern was for the UFC, though. It's the UFC brand. Like, Calvin Kattar got $115,000 for that fight. That's not enough. Like, if you cared about the fighters, you'd pay them more to take that kind of damage. Like, and then, of course, you know, what comes next is him, you know, shitting on me and reinforcing a narrative again. And I mean, I don't need to play. You've heard it all. So question. So this is the clip I'm talking about. He was freaking out. You know, he took a lot of punishment. You remember this. Now, interestingly, this is on that Fight Island Declassified. It was in episode 2, which now has disappeared. You can watch the other 3 though. But it was just, you know, it basically is expressing concern for the health of Calvin Kattar. Then he goes over to his corner and he tells them that, you know, they've got to get to the hospital instead of the press conference. Again, I have no doubt that he has a concern about what's going on in this fight. But you've got a referee in there. Again, Herb Dean should have stepped in there and stopped this fight. The corner team, you can't expect them stepping in and stop that, because they're going to want to give their fighter that opportunity to get the fight won. They've got their gym's invested in it. Their money's invested in it. You don't know what else is driving that corner to push the fighter to keep competing. But it happens. So someone needs to be there to intervene and look after fighters. And, you know, there just wasn't someone there that night. I mean, he just took such a beating. And this is Dana coming over. I mean, here's me in the background. Dana saying that it should have been stopped in the 4th. Absolutely, it should have been stopped in the 4th. But then the previous week, when I'm calling for a fighter to be looked after by the same referee, and I get shit on, and then the narrative is reinforced. And then, of course, I'll skip past this nonsense. And then, of course, the comment about me, the reason why I was fired. Oh, I'll play you this bit. It's funny.
And stuff like that.
100%. I mean, you guys know how many times that's happened. I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. And I definitely don't give a fuck what Dan Hardy thinks, you know? Dan Hardy's a guy that was mistreating a woman who worked here, and that's why he was fired. So obviously, he's bitter, and I'm assuming that's why he would say something like that.
Okay, so I'm bitter. Yeah, I'm a little bit, because a lot of like false narratives have been told, and I understand that the UFC weren't just going to quietly let me leave. They were going to have to do something about it, because they didn't want me moving on to a different organization with any kind of worth to my brand, because then Bellator sounds a bit more like the UFC because they've got Goldie, and you know what I mean? It's like these silly games that are played. You know, I'm like, this is common knowledge. Like, you will get damaged as much as possible so you don't move on and do something else. Now, I'm not saying that like this is all in my imagination, because the timeline alone and the way that the news was broken was what solidified it for me. And the point when I realized that I'm never going to commentate or work for the UFC again directly. I will work on their stuff. I will talk about their stuff. I love working for BT and doing my breakdowns, but I can't in good conscience. I couldn't go back to that organization the way that they fucking treated me at the end. So you asked me if I'm bitter. Yeah, I'm probably a little bit bitter, but ultimately what I wanted to do is just kind of let you guys know that I see the game that's being played. You know, mistreating a woman. Unbelievable. Like, it was a colleague of mine that I had known I'd been working with as a fighter and as an ambassador for the UFC for probably 12, 15 years. And I'd made several complaints about the fact that she was just not very good at her job. Like, she was lazy. She would not connect fighters with the media. I got so many complaints about it. And I still, to this day, I am constantly hearing about it and how obstructive and difficult she is to work with. Like, I'm not making this up. Like, people know this. There's a lot of people listening right now who know exactly who this person is, and they could vouch for me, but no one can vouch for me, because if you speak out, then your creds are gone, your media credentials are gone, you don't get access, you don't get this, you don't get that. They'll attack your sponsors and whatever. They'll do whatever they can to maintain control. Funnily enough, I'm really enjoying the series Andor at the moment. You're enjoying that, aren't you, Jamie? Up the rebellion. I love it. So, January 16th, Holloway Kattar fight. I did the commentary and I did the post-fight show. I got back to the hotel about 5 o'clock in the morning, about 5 a.m. on the 17th. The 17th was the start of UFC 257 fight week. So I was downstairs ready to record at noon, ready to start promoting that event. About 12:30, the incident happened. I was due to be working the McGregor fight for a radio broadcaster live in the arena. I was told that I was doing that. I was taken off my UFC duties, so I was available to do that. And the one person that was right in the middle of all of it was the one person that didn't make that connection. That was my issue. I asked why. I didn't get an answer. I couldn't understand why. Couldn't understand why I'd been steered away from all my media obligations after the Stop the Fight. You know, like, they couldn't fire me straight after that, because that would have looked terrible. It would have looked terrible on the UFC, because people would have gone, oh, well, he got fired because of that. There had to be another opportunity. So that unfortunately feels like what's happened. And so we'll go back to my timeline. So January 17th, the incident happened about 12:30. I went into fighter interviews at 2:30, and I was in fighter interviews for the Chiesa Magny fight, which was midweek. I was commentating that. I was due to be. I came out of fighter interviews 7:30, and I had a phone call straight away. The decision had been made to send me home. So I got on the plane. I didn't know what had been said. Still don't know what's been said. Don't know who was spoken to. Don't know who was asked about it. I've no idea. January 28th, I had a phone call for less than 10 minutes with the the VP of Human Resources. About 10 minutes. That's the only time I got the opportunity to give my side of the story. February 18th, I got fired. I was phoned and fired. I've got a wicked little printout, which I'm going to put in a frame at some point and put up in here. Fired on February 18th. March 7th/8th, the evening, the news was broken through Dave Meltzer and Wrestling Observer. And it was incident with a female employee on Fight Island. Now, the reason I mention the dates and why it's important is because when the news broke on March 8th, and it was all leaned into about our female employee, which is completely irrelevant, has nothing to do with anything. Has nothing to do with anything. Like, there was all speculation about who it was, etc. It might have been this person, might have been that person. You don't know the person. It was none of them. It was someone. It was someone that works in the back. It's like she's in and around. You'll probably see her in the background and stuff, but she's one of those people that know people and pull strings, and I don't know what she said, but words were said, and I don't know. Anyway, the reason I mentioned the dates is because March 8th was also International Women's Day. And as soon as I woke up and saw the news, and I saw that it was International Women's Day, it dawned on me what they were trying to do, what they were trying to suggest by putting the information out on that day, hoping that all the news would pick it up, and then I would be driven into the ground. That was what their plan was. I'm thankful that a few people spoke out in support, and I'm thankful that a lot of you people know that I might be mouthy, but I'm never going to be mistreating a woman, a female employee. I would never. Anybody that's worked with me would know that. Anybody that knows me would know that. I just wanted to kind of set that record straight because a lot of misinformation gets put out there. Things get twisted, things get said. It is what it is. It's the sport we live in. The sport we live in. The world we live in. The sport we love. Anyway, I'm not talking about that anymore. I'm done with it. Have you got any questions about it, maybe? What's up? We got any questions, Jamie? Everyone's just listening quietly. I appreciate your joining. Look, it's just... It's of course it's fucking frustrating. Of course it is. Because every day I wake up and I focus on MMA. I love it. I love talking about MMA, watching it, learning about it, sharing it with people. But then when you've got a couple of people in the biggest organization in the world that are gunning for you, trying to do everything they can to shut you down, it gets fucking annoying. Yeah, it does. It does. But then you get to a point where I'm at right now, where I'm in Tupac mood. I listen to Dana's words at the press conference, and I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I owe nobody anything. I'm beholden to nobody. This is my mic. This is my channel. I can say what the fuck I like. I can drink rum. I can smoke my CBD vape, and I can do what I like. And what I can guarantee for you guys from this point onwards is that you're going to get facts from me. If you've got a question about anything, I will answer it to the best of my ability. I don't know much, but what I do know, I'll tell you. There's a lot of bullshit in this sport. There's a lot of bullshit in this industry. Unfortunately, corporation has taken over, and I am not a corporate person. I'm an MMA nerd that sits in my room and researches. I don't do all the schmoozing and the shenanigans and the Prosecco drinking. It's just not me. I can't fucking stand it. I want to be in my room. I want to be prepping for the fights because that's what I love. And I don't want anything else to get in the way of it. So my relationship to the UFC and to anything else from this point on is irrelevant to me. Because I've rediscovered my love of martial arts after going through this mire of fucking nonsense. I've arrived at this point when I realised that this is where I'm supposed to be. This is where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be here looking into it and going, fucking hell, what is going on? Because there are people in there that I hope and trust would be able to stand up and say the right thing. And constantly they fucking let me down. Constantly I see people that should be speaking up and saying, hang on a minute, that's not right. That scale didn't settle. That was still fucking wafting. What's going on here? Who are you? You work for the organization. You shouldn't be even touching the scales. Like, I could go on and on and on. I see constantly these nonsense, these shenanigans, this fuckery. And there's no reason why I can't tell you about it anymore. Yeah. Liberating, eh? And shout out to Laura Sanko. Go and give her a channel a like and a subscribe. You can subscribe to ours as well if you want. You might be sick of me by this point. Go and give Laura Sanko's channel a like and a subscribe. She's a fucking real one. And Dean Thomas as well. He's a real one. There's some real ones in there. There's some good people in there. It's really difficult to not get mired into this politics and nonsense. Like, I have people around me that have just started to kind of step into the industry, and they're like going, God, oh, this is ugly. It is. Because you can't walk around backstage at a UFC event and feel excitement from people, because there are people that are doing a job and they don't want to be there. And you feel they don't want to be there because the way they treat people. It's disgusting. I would work for free for the UFC. I did do a lot of work for free for the UFC. Because my job, when they put me in that position, was an ambassador for Europe. And I did it to the best of my ability. The best of my ability. And I still do it now. I have that integrity. And I will say, to the person that I had a disagreement with, we'll call it Icky for now. I did apologize. I sent an email to apologize. I wasn't a great version of myself. I was frustrated, but I had also complained 3 times to 3 different people in the organization that she was disconnecting me from work that I was supposed to be doing. And that all fell on deaf ears. So I don't give a fuck anymore. Okay. I've been talking for a long time. Did we get anywhere with the questions about Petr Yan and Sean O'Malley? Did anybody give me any viable answer? Megan, it wasn't Megan. It wasn't anybody you know. It wasn't anybody you know. In fact, here's a story for you. I didn't know I was going to tell you this story, but I will. I remember one of my last events I worked, I was sitting around a table with a bunch of people that were all, matchmakers and executives and stuff, and there was a conversation going on, which was a bit weird for me at the time because I just started dating Veronica and things were still early, but, she's beautiful and everyone knows she's beautiful. And so I was kind of keeping a low profile. I didn't say anything to anybody. I'm sitting around this table and this conversation's going on, which was putting me off my food, to be honest. They were talking about all the female fighters on the roster and how they rate them, how they score them amongst one another, not for any technical or athletic or, MMA endeavor, just basically purely based on how they looked. And I'm sitting for about 20-30 minutes listening to this conversation. And I'm like, fuck, would they just bring me my food? This is why I didn't go out to socialize with anybody, because I'd just rather not. I'd rather not listen to their fucking conversations. And I'm sitting there in this table amongst these people, all having these conversations, the people I would expect to be better and not saying the fucking things they're saying, talking about female fighters on the UFC roster, Veronica included. Of course, she was voted as the hottest, and I do agree with that, and with MMA Guru's conclusion on that. You can't deny it. But what was interesting is that there was one female there as well. She was there with a partner. And as the conversation kind of came around, one person in the group clicked on. They were like, hang on a minute, you're not engaging in this conversation, which immediately made them feel uncomfortable. I thought to myself, okay. So they now want to know who I think is the hottest woman in the UFC. And I'm not fucking playing this game. So I go, Don Madge. He's a good-looking dude. He's got them good cheekbones, model features. Don Madge, he's a good-looking dude. And immediately the table was like, this is kind of weird. And I just felt like I just reflected their shit back at them. Because what they were saying was making me feel uncomfortable. You can talk about what you like. I didn't want to be part of that conversation. And I think that was one of the moments when they realized that I'm kind of not a part of that little clique. I'm just not. I'm not one of those people. I have very few people in my life, and I love them dearly, and I'll do anything for them. And I love all you guys for tuning in and speaking to me and interacting with me. But honestly, fucking hell, some people. It wasn't Laura Sanko. Laura Sanko is an absolute superstar. Oh shit! I lost my pen. What else? Couldn't you sue for slander if it wasn't true? Yeah, I mean, yeah, most likely I could, but can you imagine that? Can you imagine what that would take? How much fucking money it would cost, and how much effort and time, lifetime. This is something let's go off on a little philosophical tangent for you a minute. I'm not saying don't waste my time anymore, because time's too trivial. If I say to someone, don't waste my time, they think of a clock that just keeps fucking ticking. My time is limited just like everybody else's is. If someone's wasting your time, tell them stop wasting my fucking lifetime. Stop wasting my lifetime. Because that's what it is. You won't get it back. You won't get it back. So stop wasting it doing stuff that doesn't make you happy. Stop wasting stuff with people that don't do anything for you, don't bring anything to you. There's been a few people in my life, in the distance and recently, that I have had to shed, and I feel so much better shedding it. And this saltiness that Dana says about me and the UFC, I'm done with that as well. I'm done with that as well. Because I wouldn't want to be back in that seat. You know, it was an absolute honor and a privilege to be there for that UFC on ABC 1. But at the same time, I'm watching Herb Dean letting this guy get fucking pummeled in the head. And I'm watching this performance going around me where they're like, oh, well, you know, got to get him to the doctor, got to get him to the doctor. I mean, yeah, of course you got to get him to the doctor. Because he's probably got a really bad concussion and someone should have stopped the fight at the end of the 4th round. I know what we'll do. We love our athletes. We care about them so much. Let's start a fucking slap fighting league. Let's trade concussions for cash. I mean, come on. And you can advertise that to me while I'm trying to watch MMA, while I'm trying to enjoy my sport, and now I'm... Come on. Like, say one thing, do another. Say one thing, do another. Say one thing, talk some shit, do another. It's the same pattern over and over again. You can say what you like at the press conference. I don't care. I don't give a fuck what you think either, Dana. I don't, honestly. I did once. And there are a lot of fighters out there that do give a fuck what you think. But they give a fuck what you think because you're in control. They wouldn't look at you on the street if you weren't in control of the UFC. And certainly not the way that you treat people. Jesus. Like, people will wake up one day. They'll wake up. Slowly people are doing it. And if you have enough thorns in your side, eventually you're going to bleed out. Don't ever forget that. Okay. Slap fighting is complete BS, isn't it? I mean, what the fuck is that about? How did that become a thing? I wonder, back in the old MMA days, stop the fight. I'm going to make a t-shirt of that for sure. I wonder if the old MMA days, if anybody was watching MMA and feeling like I do about slap fighting now, because I'm sure they did. Like, I had a long conversation with somebody about fucking, oh, it's this and that, human cockfighting and stuff, but I can't, for the life of me, understand the endeavor of slap fighting, aside from to make a bit of cash and get something for your Instagram. It's cashing in on fucking brain trauma. It's cashing in on brain trauma. I got a question. I keep seeing little orange stripes, but I need like a magnifying glass on this shit. Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question, Mark. Matt Coelho. Okay. Do you know if there is a male gay fighter in the UFC, a male gay fighter in the UFC that we don't know about? And what do you think? What do you think it would do for the sport? Sorry, I'm fucking struggling to read this. I know there is a lot of homophobia out there. You know what? There has to be. And at some point, someone is going to power move it. Someone's going to be like, yeah, and what? And what? Why would it matter? Why does it matter? It wouldn't matter to me. Shouldn't matter to anybody else. Unfortunately, right at this point, no one has taken the fucking, I'm going to own this shit. And I don't know whether that's because they've not been confident to, or for whatever reason. Because, yeah, of course, they're going to be absolutely up against it. I remember having a conversation. This is a weird conversation. Mickey Rourke called me once. The Mickey Rourke. Dan, yeah, hi. We're making a movie and I need you to be in it. Okay. It's about a rugby player, a gay rugby player who came out and the struggles that he had. I think the movie was made. He was like, do your front teeth come out? What? No. Like, could they? No. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll give you a call if I have something else in mind. Click. That was it. That was my start and finish of my interaction with Mickey Rourke. My front teeth didn't come out, so I wasn't right for the role. But you've got to think any sport is going to be, any sport, especially a male-dominated sport. Like, people still shit on women's MMA. You know what I mean? Like, we've not even got past that yet. We've not even got past that yet. God, I reflect on us sometimes as a fucking species, and we have got so much to learn. We have got so much to learn. Like, so much developing to do. It's quite disappointing. Really, it is. Oh, hang on. What we got? Mark Hunt's a solid one as well. Everyone's like, what the fuck? Yeah, I know. I might have lost my mind. This might be the moment. You might be watching the very moment where I actually lose my goddamn mind. Outlaw rum. Fucking Howler Head and Melt Boys, and come on. I worked this out the other day because he gave that Melt Boy a $250,000 for his birthday, didn't he? And I worked it out, if Dana, out of the 600 million that he made off the UFC sale, he could give everybody in the top 15 a $250,000 for their birthday, and it wouldn't even touch the sides. He wouldn't even notice. He could still have his Scrooge McDuck swimming pool to jump into. Yeah. Makes you wonder if you got to that situation, whether you'd change. Would you change? Would you be able to hold it together? I'd like to think I'd go, you know what? There's a bit of cash for me. Let me see what I can do with the rest. Let me see what fun I can have with the rest and what people's lives I can change. Like, I genuinely hold on to that belief in myself that I would be that person. But who the fuck knows? Like, do you know? Like, no, you don't know until you've got that cash. You just don't know. And you got to wonder, because I know Dana, I know friends of Dana's from way back in the day when he was, teaching boxercise classes and scraping pennies together to buy a pizza to watch the boxing. Like, he's not the same person anymore. I don't know. UFC is a reflection of society. It is, isn't it? It's so disappointing. I always wanted it to be purer because it's martial arts, but no. Polidori's Revenge. Do you reckon MMA Guru is handsome? Do you struggle with that? I do struggle with it a little bit, to be honest. I mean, because my hair's going a little bit grey now, and I've noticed that he's got the most luscious ginger locks. It almost like he's a love child of Jimmy Warled. Like, if he trained at my gym, I would certainly think they were related. And I have the impression that there's a lot of hair in that smelly beanie as well. You should let it out, guy. Let it down. Let it down. Like, let it flow in the wind, dude. Come on. Oh, hang on. Matthew Byrne. Hi, Dan. Will you do a war room on Paul versus Silva? You know what? I absolutely will do. I've got it ready in my iPad, actually. I'll record you that tomorrow, and Jamie will have it up probably Tuesday. What do you reckon, Jamie? Yeah? Yeah, I have got one. I have got a war room for that. The other thing as well that we're noticing, the other thing as well that we are doing on the channel, given the fact that I'm telling everyone to that I don't give a fuck anymore, so, we've got to make plans. We're starting YouTube memberships, because it seems to be a cool thing to do. The kids like it. And what I would like to do is to put some more content out for you guys, put a couple of days of my time aside and really dine out on some content that I want to put out for you guys, because I've got some cool ideas. I'm also going to do some live streams. We were going to call it YouTube memberships, but I had an idea when we were doing kettlebells earlier that I might call it YouTube uncensorship, and then I might just say whatever I like on there, and then you'll get the clean, polished, sponsorable version on the normal channel. This is the X-rated version. I've been wearing a bandana around my face all day. The Outlaws coming out again. Polidori's Revenge. He's throwing the cash around. I feel like a stripper. It's like Spearmint Rhino in here. Would you date Guru? He's a bit short for me, to be honest, mate. He's a bit short for me. I mean, he's shorter than Veronica, especially, Well, do I struggle? Only when I see a photo of MMA Guru do I struggle with my sexuality. He's the only person that makes me question it, to be honest. I mean, he's such a handsome devil sitting there in his shed smelling of farts. No, honestly, you are a good MMA guru. You are a good example of the side of MMA that is absolutely brand new to me. You kids got to remember, I was at school when the internet wasn't a thing. I remember having a floppy disk that was 3.14 megabytes, and you could have one fucking photo on it. So, you know, things have changed a lot. Things have changed a lot. And the other thing as well is this trolling thing's not a new thing. Like, people forget what I did to Marcus Davis. That was a masterpiece of a trolling. Like, he lost his shit. The UFC made a 10-minute extra about it because he'd lost his shit so much. I even made t-shirts. I hate Dan Hardy. You'll see them on the Full Reptile website, which we've got the medallion drop today, actually. So go and grab yourself some of that. I hate Dan Hardy t-shirts. I wore it at the weigh-in. Like, I was just poking fun at him the whole time. That was Cage Warriors Forum, which was a fucking hell of a place back in the day, the Cage Warriors Forum was. It was so much fun because people would just, like, there would be shit talking and nonsense, but you knew everybody because you'd see each other every weekend. So, of course, you know, it got to a stage where sometimes it would maybe escalate and, you know, sometimes the old MMA days of the riot police were showing up before the event's over. Yeah. MRM, Fight Companion with the subscription. Would you like a Fight Companion, would you? The problem with the Fight Companion is that it's on like fucking really late. Can I talk about DMT, dimethyltryptamine? What would you like to know about it? I will literally talk about whatever you like. DMT, dimethyltryptamine. I mean, you can watch the documentary, you can read the book, Spirit Molecule. Fascinating stuff. You can even get it vapes now, I think. I've seen some people with these. It's a weird thing because it's something that we produce within our pineal gland when we're asleep. It's what causes us to dream. Dr. Rick Strassman would also tell you that you release small amounts of dimethyltryptamine at stressful points in your life, like birth and death and, you know, near-death experiences, which is why people have these crazy spiritual experiences that they're tripping balls because they've got natural DMT flowing through their brain. However, you can get the synthetic stuff, and it is very, very unusual. I have smoked it a couple of times before when I was living in the US, and your whole body disappears. Like, gone. Like a puddle of liquid sitting on the pillow. I had no idea what was going on. It was way too chaotic. What I will say, though, is that I prefer the more natural approaches to access DMT, like ayahuasca, or, of course, psilocybin, psilocin with the mushrooms. Like, you can get great work done with them, and they should be accessible to everybody. That's some more societal fuckery that's going on. Like, that should be available to everybody. We should be able to connect with that shit whenever we want to. And that's something that's been taken away. But we're taking it back. Liz Truss is fucking gone. Boris Johnson's not getting back in. I'm sick of this bullshit. We've got to fix this stuff. I'm starting a new channel, a political channel. I'm going to talk about everything. Am I a pureblood? Is that like a Twilight thing or something? Polydari's Revenge. He's got questions for days again. He is like stuffing these dollar bills into my panties right now, dude. Do you have any advice on how to come out for Guru? Open the door, mate. I would imagine that little room that you're sitting's got a door. That's the way to come out. You open the door and you come out. You just emerge from the room. It won't smell of farts outside either, and it won't be covered in Cheeto dust on the floor. I mean, you might even be able to see the sky if you leave that room. I don't know where the room is. But, you know, I don't know what a pureblood is. That must be something to do with. Oh, yeah. What did you make of Hamzat Khabib peace video? Inspirational or hostage footage? It's a weird old thing. The kid in the red tracksuit was Kadarov's son that Chimaev was with. The hat that Chimaev was wearing with the big dirty K on the front was his merch. I follow a lot of accounts. I get into a lot of geopolitics and stuff when I'm not researching MMA. A couple of days ago, that kid was delivering Ukrainian prisoners of war with hoods over their head, bent over and handcuffed, delivering them to his dad. I don't know whether Chimaev's. I don't know what's going on. I just feel sorry for him, and I don't know whether there was some kind of disagreement between them because of the unrest in that area of the world. I'm not getting into geopolitics right now, but it was odd, and I don't like how it creeps in. I don't. I prefer shit going on in the Apex, to be honest, when there's not as much. Because there was a bunch of stuff going on in the crowd last night. You kept seeing, like, it's weird. Like, there's actually a fight going on. Actually a fight with two of the best fighters in the world actually going on. And what you want to watch is some fucking drunk dude swinging at somebody else and rolling down the bleachers. Watch it on YouTube tomorrow, dude. Okay. Chris Phillips, I owe you an apology. You don't owe me an apology, mate. You don't even know me. I used to think you were a racist. Why would someone say such a thing? I can't even begin to imagine why you would have a thought like that. But now you're my favourite analyst. One of your favourite analysts. Oh, hang on a minute. You can't drop a bombshell on me like that. Saying something like that genuinely makes me feel bad. And then I'm only one of your favourite analysts. Okay, yeah, what's this? Insane Fame NYC. Dan, what's up with Dana saying you were fired for mistreating a female employee? My friend, you'll have to skip back a little bit to get the full extent of my rant. Needless to say, he's full of shit, and we know he's full of shit. They've tried to defame my character when they fired me. They didn't like the fact that I shouted at Herb Dean. I understand that. I apologise for shouting at Herb Dean, but someone needed to shout at him. Someone regularly needs to shout at him. In fact, we should take all this money from this super chat and put it together into a fund. We'll start a GoFundMe, or call it a GoFund yourself, and we'll have someone permanently situated at the side of the cage every time Herb Dean is refereeing. They can just have some kind of like drum or a cymbal or something to wake him up when he's fucking not doing his job. Jesus. No, I wasn't mistreating a female. I would never ever. It wouldn't even begin to cross my mind. I was having a disagreement with a colleague who was incredibly difficult to work with, and he's still incredibly difficult for everyone to work with. And all you people that are involved in the MMA media, you know what I'm talking about. You know what the score is. You just have to keep your mouth shut because the F is for fuckery in UFC. You know that. Okay, Norton MMA. Do you ever think there will be an MMA org that will keep everything pure from an individual respect? Feels like all orgs are now political and messy. They are, Norton, all political and messy. And I don't know, honestly, what is ever going to change that. Ultimately, a promotion is a promotion. It's a corporation. You are as valuable to it as you are to a capitalist society. Like, I don't have any problem with that. It is prize fighting. That's what we get into. It's what we get into. Like, it's what we do. I've still got offers coming through. Hey, would you fight for this? Maybe. Would you do this rules for this? Yeah, maybe. We're a prize fighter. You put me on the table and you point somebody in my direction. You say, if you go through that person, you can get this cash. That's what we do. I don't get it. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is that being taken advantage of, which is what we see constantly, which is why people are getting paid peanuts when they're putting millions in the pockets of the people at the top. You know, it is what's it, trickle down economics? It needs to trickle down a bit more. We could do with a waterfall. The percentage of revenue that gets towards the UFC fighters compared to athletes in other sports is embarrassing. What is it, 17% compared to the NFL's like 51, 52%? All sports went through this, though. Don't forget the first ever UFC mention, MMA mention was, 1993 in the post-fight write-up of UFC 1. Like, it's a new sport. Like, all sports have been through this. It'll get to the stage where we have some level playing field, and I think that will be a big difference. But it won't be something within the UFC that does it. It will be a union. It will be a fighters' union. And why does a fighters' union never show up? Because everyone that talks about it gets a little check in their pocket and they shut the fuck up. Because no one's got any goddamn integrity. Stand your ground. Turn the money away. Do the right thing. Okay. Thoughts on the Northern Ireland conflict? No, thoughts on Northern Ireland, the conflict there, and what do you... like most about the guru? Any advice on how he can be less nervous around the girls? Honestly, I mean, you shouldn't be nervous around the girls, mate. I mean, you've got such a gift of the gab. I mean, you're live streaming so regularly. You should just be able to talk at her until she can't get away. I mean, like, you can talk almost as much as I fucking can, let's be honest. Northern Ireland was when I was growing up as a kid. It was all kind of odd. Like, I don't get it. I don't get the division. I don't get the lines drawn. I want people to be together. I want people to be happy and content and live peaceful lives and not fuck with one another. That's all I want. I want to live in a quiet little box in the forest with a stack of books and some puppies. Oh, hang on. I'm getting told to read money chats here. Okay. Oh, I've missed one. Sorry, Maurice, I missed one. But Veronica is on it. She's in the crow's nest. She's watching out for all you guys. Why do so many professional fighters still underestimate? Okay, I'm going to read this as I think it was supposed to be written because it's a little bit twisted around. Why do so many professional fighters still underestimated time? Okay, so why do fighters underestimate the amount of time it takes to acclimate? Honestly, I think people liken it sometimes to going on holiday. I think sometimes people go, oh, we'll go across the world. I've been to Europe one time and it'll be fine. And we'll just get on the plane and it'll be like getting in a car and we'll get off on the other side and it'll be like we're taking a long bus ride and I've had a nice nap and watched a movie. But it's not. Like altitude, salty foods, like time zone changing, daylight at different times of the day. Like you have to take care of a lot of things. Circadian cycle. If you're a young fighter, learn about your circadian cycle. This is something I started to learn about right towards the end of my career, and it was an easy shift for me once I'd figured it out. It was a really simple thing to do, and it actually really benefited me when I was traveling around the world, commentating for the UFC, because of course they're going to fly you to 17 different directions to get to where you need to go, and they're going to have you 16 different layovers, and you're going to be on the ground for 20 minutes before you start work. I had to be very good at adapting, and fortunately I was able to utilize my knowledge of weight cutting to actually benefit my professional career for as long as I was able to remain professional, of course. Have I ever been professional? I don't know. That's a meditation for later. The circadian cycle is important because it regulates the time when your body is used to waking up and feeding. And the easiest way of hacking your circadian cycle is to go. So super simple. Say if I'm flying out of London Heathrow at noon tomorrow, and I am arriving in Japan 12 hours later on a direct flight. What I need to do is wake up tomorrow morning and have breakfast on UK time before I head to the airport. Then I get to the airport, I do the travel, I don't eat anything. I arrive in Japan, it's probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm feeling kind of weird, 12 hours flight, etc., etc. I stay awake. I stay awake until nighttime, I don't eat anything, I stay hydrated. I then go to sleep, and I wake up in the morning, and I have breakfast on my new time zone. That's the way to do it. It's the quickest way to shift your body clock. It's super easy. But you just have to be disciplined, because what do people do when they're on planes? They get bored and they work their way through like 16 packs of fucking Haribo. Honestly, I don't catch planes as much as I used to anymore. The last time I was on a plane, this woman next to me was hoovering up Haribos like a fucking hungry hippo. I have never seen anything like it. She went through 6 packs in an hour and a half flight. 6 packs. Can you imagine that? And not the little tiddler packs, like the two-handed, had to open them proper fucking. She went through all of them. It was a feat. It was quite disgusting. Okay, Chris Phillips. When I was new to the sport, I didn't know much. I still don't know much, Chris. Don't feel lonely. I felt like you would always make picks against. No, black fight. No, not at all. Not at all. Now I understand more. You were picking based on skills and matchups. Look, like, people read into my picks all the time, constantly. They're like, oh, well, you never gave him credit for this and that and blah, blah, blah. there's not a single person in the world that I wouldn't treat like a brother as long as they act well to me. I have no problem with anybody in the world. When I'm making picks, I have nothing against the individual fighter. Sometimes I'll say something like, Aljo, I'm kind of on the fence about him. That's my honest perspective. But it's always about their technique and their ability and their approach to fighting. It's never ever anything to do with anything else. Like, I love martial arts more than I love any individual in the sport. Believe me. All I want to know is who's going to win the fight and what I can learn from it. Because like I was talking about a bit earlier with lifetime, don't waste my lifetime. I feel like I have sand running through my fingers, and all you people out there should feel it as well. Sand is running through your fingers. And I need to build a castle out of this sand before the time runs out, and that castle is hopefully information and knowledge that I can leave behind when I go. That's all I'm really interested in, to be honest. I'm interested in leaving some good, positive information behind, because all the people that I look up to are people that I have gained some really good information off in my lifetime. And the other thing that I realized the other day, a lot of the people I look up to were shut down and shit on and chastised, which fills me with confidence, or they were weirdo recluses, which doesn't necessarily fill me with confidence, but certainly explains a few things. Justin Carter, not sure if you're a manga reader, but there are 2 amazing MMA manga you should read. Tepu, T-E-P-P-U-U, I don't know, and All-Round Meguru, All-Rounder. I'll check them out. You know what? I had a friend who was really into manga when I was younger, Guyver and stuff, but I didn't really get on with him because of that. I got on with him because we were Warhammer heads. I got my Games Workshop stuff here. Yeah, comics, a little bit comics, a lot of books. I used to read a lot of books. Judge Dredd was my main comic, my only comic really I read, and that is why literally the whole room is wallpapered with Judge Dredd. I've had a couple of people request recently about a bit of a tour of the room as well. I will give you a tour of this room because it's fucking cool, honestly. It is a mess of action figures and toys and, well, we've got some soundproofing up now. A couple of electric guitars. Chuck us that green one, Jamie. Oh, hang on a minute. It's clipped in. Well, I would say I play your tune out, but you don't want that. You don't want that. Just watch me getting knocked out by Condit again. It's fucking hilarious. In fact, go and watch the MMA Guru's video on the breakdown, because it's probably the best thing he's done on his channel, to be honest. It is really good. Not quite turning my fist over. You are correct on that, but ultimately you don't have to necessarily turn your fist over on every punch. There are certain punches, like the one that Said Nurmagomedov uses, where he's like a ridge hand, or you can strike up from under the chin like Khabib does. Lots of different ways of striking with the hand. I tend to view it more now like a ball of weight, and I can strike from a variety of different ways with it. But yeah, I mean that Condit fight was me being foolish, not respecting his power and just fucking running onto it. Okay, who won, Sugar Sean, O'Malley, or Petr Yan? Your call, mate. I don't know. I really don't know. My instinct, I scored it for Petr Yan when I first watched it. But then when I watched it back today and I was like paying attention and scoring it, I gave the first and the last to Sean O'Malley. So I still don't know, and I'm probably going to watch it again tonight. What else? Guy. Who do you look up to that's been chastised? Oh, I mean, come on. Like, Galileo, Da Vinci, Descartes. You know, like, you can go back into philosophical history, and anybody that's fucking said anything has been shat on and chastised. Bruce Lee tried to shut him out, tried to stop him teaching martial arts to people that weren't of Asian origin, and he was like, no, it's for everybody, and I will share, which was awesome of him. Hunter S. Thompson, he was shit on and shut down and trashed, but he had such a powerful, strong voice. This is why I've got these two people tattooed on me. Hunter S. Thompson on one side and Bruce Lee on the other. I endeavour to be even a fraction like one of them would be amazing. But I'm just a humble, simple boy from Nottingham that started Taekwondo once, and now for some reason finds myself on a Sunday night in a storm, drinking rum and holding a guitar that I know full well I can't play, and you guys know I can't play it as well, answering your questions about all kinds of weird stuff. It's probably time to call it a day. It's probably time to call it a day. Aye. I've got another question through from... Oh, yeah. We're going to have to call it in a minute anyway, because I'm starting to cramp. I need to eat something. All right, we'll call it there. We'll call it there. Thank you for joining me, everybody. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time and your energy and your thoughts and your questions and your donations. I hope you're all well. I hope you all thoroughly enjoyed UFC 280. Don't give a fuck. Stand up for yourself. Don't listen to bullshit. Don't take bullshit. Live your life. Love your life. Don't waste lifetime. Look after the people around you. See you next time.